We'll start with prayers, followed by a roll call of those in attendance. This is usually followed by questions and answers to questions, statements by ministers, items on the public business, and private members' motions. On the agenda for this session, members will be debating an act to repeal the Kingston and St. Andrew Building Act and the Parish Council's Building Act, and make provisions for the regulation of the building industry, so as to facilitate the adoption and efficient application of national building standards, which will be called the National Building Code of Jamaica, for ensuring safety in the built environment, enhance amenities and promote sustainable development, and for connected matters. On the private members' motion, debate is to commence on private members' motion number 2 by Member of Parliament Ronald Thwaites regarding measures to improve the standard of performance in mathematics and science. Debate is to commence on a private member's motion number 12, again by Reverend Thwaites, regarding the public health issues arising from tobacco and ganja use. And that's what's on the agenda. It should be noted that elements of the day's agenda can be changed or moved, but before we go, here are a few things you need to bear in mind if you plan to attend a session at Gordon House. No visitor shall create any act of disorder within the precincts of the house. No visitor shall be admitted to the house without first obtaining an admission card from the office of the clerk. Visitors who remain within the precincts of the house during a suspension of the session are asked to keep silent. No photography, videography, or sketching of the proceedings is allowed unless so authorized by the presiding officer. And there should be no smoking inside the parliamentary building. Now over to the proceedings.
Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Miss Daly, Mr. Daly, Mrs. Dalrymple Philibert, Dr. Davis, Mr. Fagan, Dr. Ferguson, Dr. Green, Dr. Guy, Miss Hannah, Mr. Hales, Mrs. Holness, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Kellier, Mr. Main, Dr. McNeil, Miss Nita, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Michael Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Pickersgill, Mr. Redmond, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mrs. Simpson-Miller, Mr. Stewart, Mr. Terrelong, Mr. Dwayne Baz, Reverend Thwaites, Mr. Wright, Mr. Chuck, Mr. Daryl Vaz, Mr. Spencer, Dr. Campbell, Mr. Jackson.
Statements by ministers. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the House today are the following: Ministry Paper Number 41, Cabinet Agenda Issues dated 24th April 2017. Ministry Paper Number 42, Cabinet Agenda Issues dated 1st May 2017. Ministry Paper Number 43 and Annual Report on Audited Financial Statements of the Jamaica Veterinary Board for the years ended March 31, 2011 through March 31, 2013. Ministry Paper Number 44 and Annual Report of the Management Institute for National Development for the financial years 2010-11 and 2011-12. Ministry Paper Number 45, entitled National Policy on International Migration and Development. Ministry Paper number 46, and Annual Report and Audited Financial Statements for the Jamaica Veterinary Board for the years ended March 31, 2014 through March 31, 2015. Annual Report and Audited Financial Statements of the Transport Authority for the financial year 2015-2016. The Public Procurement Techniques, Procedures and Offsets Regulations Resolution 2017 under the Public Procurement Act. And for information, the Public Procurement Forms Regulations 2017 under the Public Procurement Act.
Members, I wish to recognize a number of students in our gallery today. They are from St. Diego High, smartly dressed and well behaved. We advise that you sit quietly and take it in. Thank you for coming. Bills brought from the Senate. Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the Public Procurement Act, the Public Procurement Techniques, Procedures and Offsets Regulations 2017 resolution. Whereas by virtue of Section 60, subsection 1 of the Public Procurement Act, herein referred to as the Act, the Minister may make such regulations as he thinks fit to give full effect to the provisions of the Act, and without prejudice to the generality of the foregoing, regulations may prescribe provisions in relation to A, procedures, standards, and criteria for the various methods and subject matter of procurement. B, the establishment, management, and operation of an electronic procurement system for the public sector. C, the bidding process and procedures. D, the provision of bid security, performance security, and any other security required in connection with procurement proceedings and the execution of procurement contracts. E, offsets. F, the procedure for the reconsideration of the actions and decisions of procuring entities. G, the procedure for the review of the actions and decisions by the review board, including its powers to make interim or ancillary orders. H, provisions in relation to fees. I, forms, including the standard forms of contracts, bidding documents, pre-qualification documents, and any other public procurement-related documents developed by the office for use by procuring entities. And J, any other thing required to be prescribed under the Act. And whereas on the 31st day of May 2017, the Minister made the Public Procurement Techniques, Procedures, and Offsets Regulations 2017 pursuant to paragraphs A, C, D, E, and J of Section 60, subsection 1 of the Act. And whereas it is provided by Section 60, subsection 2 of the Act, that regulations made on the paragraphs A, C, E, F, and G of Section 60, subsection 1 of the Act shall be subject to affirmative resolution. Now, therefore, be it resolved by this Honourable House as follows. This resolution may be cited as the Public Procurement Techniques, Procedures, and Offsets Regulations 2017 resolution. The Public Procurement Techniques, Procedures, and Offsets Regulations 2017 which were laid on the table of the House on the 6th day of June 2017, are hereby affirmed.
Minister Chuck.
Speaker, is this the Senate bill? No, not as yet. No. Sorry, Mr. Speaker. I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the Indictments Amendments Act 2017. Mr. Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to move for the first reading of the bill and also for me to give notice of second reading of the bill.
Questions and answers to questions. Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to sittings of the House. Motions for leave to introduce bills. Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained.
Mr. Speaker, I now move to introduce and have read a first time the bill shortly entitled the Criminal Justice Administration Amendment Act 2017.
A bill shortly entitled the Criminal Justice Administration Amendment Act 2017, read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of second reading of the bill. Mr. Speaker, I now move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take first reading of the bill, notice of which I gave earlier, and also for me to give notice of its second reading.
Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I now move to introduce and have read the first time the bill shortly entitled the Indictments Amendment Act 2017.
A bill shortly entitled Indictments Amendment Act 2017, read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of second reading of the bill. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Prime Minister, I beg to seek the leave of the House for me to withdraw the bill shortly entitled the National Identification and Registration Act 2017, standing at number 10 in the Prime Minister's name on the public business on the order of business. Mr. Speaker, the main considerations were that there were several changes to be made, and it was most appropriate that the bill should be withdrawn and a new bill tendered, which will be done at a later stage.
Is this the wish of the House?
Yes.
Members?
Yes. Can I?
The bill is now withdrawn.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to find out what is the specific reason, because this is a matter that, in respect to the
Mr. What are you speaking on?
the withdrawal of the bill, or the bill that is about
I'm
to be
afraid,
withdrawn.
according to the record, you'd have to seek its recommitment, because that was put to the House.
But it wasn't voted on, Mr. Speaker. It wasn't voted on. I didn't hear you say.
I have no objection in you seeking a recommitment, so you can speak on the matter.
I'm seeking recommittal.
No, we're providing a new bill.
Members.
What is it afraid? What is it that you're afraid of? What is it that you're...
Member, because what you are going to say may elicit a number of discussion on the matter, I would prefer you to do it officially.
Mr. Speaker,
And I would accommodate you requesting a recommitment so you can speak on the matter.
thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
You have to seek the permission of your colleagues.
And I so do, Mr. Speaker.
Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. You may proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I like the way you conduct the business of the House. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to find out whether or not the,
Ms. Curtis, what did he say?
if there's going to be any speed, because this is a matter that, in respect to this bill, the government has been speaking loudly about wanting to do a re-verification for the. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm asking now,
Order.
what are those reasons? What are those reasons that the minister is giving?
All right, I'll answer. Mr. Speaker, the original bill that was tabled had quite a number of errors and cross-references. This has nothing to do with the electoral re-verification. This is a national identification system, which is a new system that is to be implemented. This is a matter that has been going on for the last 20-odd years. The bill, Mr. Speaker, that was tabled, unfortunately, had several errors. And it was more appropriate to withdraw it rather than to be correcting, as happened in far too many bills, dozens of corrections. And since debate has not started on the bill as yet, it was more appropriate to withdraw it, and we are going to retable a new one.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Minister, you may now put for the withdrawal. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I now ask for recommittal of the item notice of motion given orally and presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained. To enable me on behalf of the Prime Minister to table the new bill we made mention earlier, to ask for its first reading and to give notice of its second reading.
The question is for the recommittal of the item notice of motion given orally and the presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Notice of motion given orally.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Prime Minister, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move to introduce and have read the first time a bill shortly entitled the National Identification and Registration Act 2017. Mr. Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take first reading of the bill and to give notice of its second reading.
Presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Prime Minister, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take first reading of the bill, notice of which I gave earlier, and also for me to give notice of its second reading.
Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I now move to introduce on behalf of the Prime Minister, and I've read a first time, the bill shortly entitled the National Identification and Registration Act 2017.
A bill shortly entitled the National Identification and Registration Act 2017, read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Prime Minister, I beg to give notice of second reading of the bill.
Public business. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, on the public business today, the bill entitled an act to repeal the Kingston and St. Andrew Building Act and the Parish Council Building Act to make new provision for the regulation of building industry will be taken today by the Minister of Local Government and Community Development.
Minister Desmond McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Permission to speak from a seat other than mine, Mr. Speaker. Permission to speak from the seat.
Go ahead, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Some order in the House.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, I'd like to express the appreciation of the government to all those who have contributed to the development of this bill. I wish to make reference to the Office of the Chief Parliamentary Counsel, the Attorney General's Chamber, the legal unit and other officers within the Ministry of Local Government and Community Development and the various sectors associated with whom I've met to discuss the provisions of the bill. Mr. Speaker, I want to place on record that this bill, Mr. Speaker, the concept started long ago, and the previous minister did table the bill in 2016, and it fell off the other paper. And it is a privilege, Mr. Speaker, to have the opportunity to present this bill, because today will be a landmark in terms of local government and the way forward. However, Mr. Speaker, I note the headlines of one of this morning's daily newspaper, where certain statements were attributed to a certain sector of the trade. Mr. Speaker, I want to make the government's position clear. This bill, as I said before, had the involvement of a wide cross-section of the sector. We engage at all stages, Mr. Speaker, the input of the industry. The positions that were taken as it relates to the bill, Mr. Speaker, came out of extensive discussions. Some of the comments in this morning's paper I consider to be very unfortunate, Mr. Speaker, but most importantly, some of the points made as it relates to the bill, Mr. Speaker, has been captured already in depth inside the bill, Mr. Speaker. The government is committed in having this bill go through all the stages. because it is important, Mr. Speaker, as we seek to advance the development of the country by having a proper building code, a proper system that governs how we build in the country. Mr. Speaker, it is my intention to invite the two representatives to sit with the ministry. We have done that before, but I will still extend an invitation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I must also mention the question of the regulations. The member who shadows the portfolio inquire about the regulations. Mr. Speaker, the regulations which were drafted in 2013, the discussions are well advanced. A number of persons within the sector comprise a committee led by the noted Noel de Costa and other such individuals of the trade have been meeting, and the next meeting of the committee to examine and to continue the process as it relates to the regulations will be held on the 19th of this month. Mr. Speaker, the importance of the building bill to create and to maintain a modern and orderly society cannot be overstated. This bill does not only create and maintain standards for construction and maintenance of physical structures across the country, but it is also a comprehensive approach to the development of the built environment in the country and the promotion of sustainable development. This approach is significant for what it prevents and also for what it facilitates. One of the most important restrictions in this bill is that of adverse possession, which we all know as squatting, which continue to be a grave problem facing the country. While the issue surrounding squatting has been extensively discussed, the ongoing challenge for residents and for the government of the day is significant. There is a continuous threat of injury and death through flooding and land slippage that accompanies the squatting in low and high areas, especially respectively. Aligned to these issues, Mr. Speaker, are the social capital loss, the over 30,000 households in over 700 informal settlements island-wide largely feature, Mr. Speaker, lack of proper sanitary facility, the threat to life and property through illegal connection, and other such illegal activities, Mr. Speaker. The provision of this bill will help to prevent and reduce squatting in Jamaica and to make our urban and rural spaces much safer. The bill should also be seen as a critical companion to the Disaster Risk Management Act and also the Local Governance Act, the Local Government Financing and Financial Management Act. The building bill emphasizes the importance of local government to national order and development by, among other things, vested the local authority with the powers within their control. It also gives them the discretion to seek public and private sector support to ensure that the intentions of the recognized engineering standards and practice that govern the construction sector is maintained. Mr. Speaker, the connection between the management construction activities as intended by this bill and the prevention of lands used in the designated areas, which are generally called no-build zones, is very clear. These are areas where, Mr. Speaker, where flooding, earthquake, and other such high-risk disaster is so great that mitigation efforts are either impractical or impossible. Such areas must be abandoned if the current occupant banned from its use of unoccupied areas are such to be subjected to the highly risk use. In the Jamaican context, Mr. Speaker, major natural disasters come in two categories: flooding, earthquakes. Section 30 to 32 of the Disaster Risk Management Act speaks to the building bill. They defined by giving ministerial powers and make provisions for the creation of special areas that are vulnerable, which, Mr. Speaker, is to be defined as no-build zone. Successive administrations have called for the establishment of these zones, but regrettably, very little practical progress has been made over the years. A number of agencies involved has made several attempts, Mr. Speaker. In this regard, I am pleased to advise the House that the regulations which I spoke to are being developed to give practical effect to Part 7 of the Disaster Risk Management Act, which is devoted to the vulnerable areas, and this, aligned with the building bill, will help to substantially close the circle of enforcement and compliance that is needed. We must be proactive and protect and preserve public and private infrastructure, rather than to suffer physical and economic loss as we respond to weather system year after year. The Bill 2017, Mr. Speaker, provides for the accreditation of building products, the construction methods, building components, and building systems, construction of the buildings that provide sanitary facilities, easy access, and adequate amenities for members of the public in general and persons with disability, the establishment of an efficient and effective system for issuing building permits and certificates of occupation, the creation of a fair and efficient system for resolving building disputes, including the establishment of a formal building appeal process, the regulation of training and certification standards, the licensing of building practitioners, and the recognition of building practitioners who are regulated under the law. This new piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker and members of this Honourable House, replaces the Kingston and St. Andrew Building Act and the Parish Council Building Act. I must emphasize, Mr. Speaker, that the approach that was taken to develop this bill was extensive. It involves all the major stakeholders, and as I said before, I personally facilitated a lot of the meetings. The bill before this Honourable House reflects the outcome of these discussions at all levels. Even more importantly, the standard setting and the compliance structure provided by the bill specifically involve agencies and associations whose skill and goodwill are indispensable to the implementation of the new transformed built environment in the country. With these remarks, Mr. Speaker, I will present the bill clause by clause. Clause 1 and 2 contain the short title of the bill and the interpretation of the 38 items and subterms that occurred through the bill. Clause 3, Mr. Speaker, outlined the objectives of the bill, in addition to those I mentioned in my opening remarks. The bill will give effect to the National Building Code. Clause 4 and 5 define how and in what circumstances the provisions of the bill will be applied. Clause 6 lists the 17 existing acts that the building bill shall be read in conjunction with, where circumstances necessitate. These include the Town and Country Planning Act, the Housing Act, and the Professional Engineers Registration Act. Part 2 of the bill is devoted to the regulatory and enforcement responsibility of a local authority. In that regard, Clause 7 establishes that the municipal cooperation of a parish or a city municipality shall be the designated local authority. Clause 8 lists the functions of the local authorities, which include the maintenance of accurate and current records of all applications for building permits, approvals or rejections of all applications, inspections reported by officers who are duly qualified. It also recognizes that the local authorities may not have all the technical skills it needs to execute these assessments and the functions. Accordingly, subclause 8 provides that this expertise may be obtained by way of contractual arrangement subject to the applicable laws and guidelines. Clause 9 empowers the local authorities to employ officials to carry out its various responsibilities as the need may arise. The officials include building surveyors, deputy building surveyors, district surveyors. This clause also outlines the conditions that shall apply to the recruitment of these services, Mr. Speaker. Clauses 10, 11, and 12 set out the powers and the duty of the Chief Engineering Officer, formerly the Superintendent of Works of a local authority. Clause 13 is very important as it clearly prevents the building surveyor or any other official engaged by the local authorities from engaging in any activity that can be considered to be that of conflict of interest. So what this section of the bill is creating, Mr. Speaker, is to prevent an employee from the local authorities to get involved in the physical drawing and preparation of plans and construction in any shape or form. No official, Mr. Speaker, shall in any way be involved in any activity that will create a conflict of interest with the local authority, Mr. Speaker. and there are penalties that will be imposed if any such aspect of this clause is breached by anyone, Mr. Speaker, and there are strict guidelines laid down under the Local Government Unifying Services and Employment Act. Part 3 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, deals with the National Building Code. Clause 14 specifies the code and the persons who will be bound by it. These persons including builders and building practitioners, owner, occupiers of premises where building works are being carried out, and every person who is involved in drafting plans for building works. Clause 15 states that the Bureau of Standards, Jamaica, shall prescribe the National Building Code amongst other functions, and Clause 16 outlined the Bureau's function in this regard. It is the certifying body for building standards, building material, products, constructions, method of building components, and building systems. It should be noted, Mr. Speaker, that this clause specifies that no local authority shall refuse to approve building work on the basis that any building product, construction method of building component or systems involved in the work is unsatisfactory. If these elements have been accredited by the Standards Authority and they are compliant with the accreditation, this is consistent with the bill's objective of speeding up the application process, Mr. Speaker. And the bill seeks to ensure that investment, whether local or otherwise, Mr. Speaker, is not caught in bureaucracy, Mr. Speaker. The bill strengthens the local authority to give it teeth to expedite the application process. Treatment of building permits constitute Part 4 of the bill. Clause 17 prevents any person from engaging in building work unless he or she has a building permit or a planning permit under the Town and Country Planning Act. This clause also states the penalty for non-compliance. Mr. Speaker, this is a very important component of the bill because we are witnessing right across the country many illegal construction being undertaken, construction that is of immense danger to individuals, Mr. Speaker. And this bill, Mr. Speaker, finally is going to give some substance to prevent those who continue to ignore, Mr. Speaker, the law set out. And the penalties in this bill is severe, Mr. Speaker, for those who believe that they can continue to circumvent the system. Clauses 18 to 22 set out a full range of requirements governing the application for building permit. They empower the local authorities to require additional information from any applicant in circumstances where an inquiry or an objection to the works proposed are made by interested persons, Mr. Speaker. people will now have an opportunity to raise concerns, to ask questions about development taking place, Mr. Speaker. This bill, yes, this bill provides, give an opportunity to individuals to raise their concerns, and by virtue of what we are now debating today, will afford them an audience. The bill is saying that you can't start once there is a legitimate complaint that is raised, Mr. Speaker, and I think that this is a game changer as far as building in the country is concerned. They provide the definition of an interested person, Mr. Speaker, which include any owner, any person who occupies a premises in the neighborhood of the proposed building work, who has written to the local authority to say that the value or enjoyment of the property is or is likely to be negatively affected by the proposed building work that it intends to be undertaken in the neighborhood. So when you have in a residential community an unregularized funeral parlor springing up, or a garage springing up next door beside you, a gas station, a massage parlor, a nightclub. So, Mr. Speaker, this bill, as I said earlier on, affords the opportunity for discussions. Clause 23 outline the procedures to be followed by the local authority after receiving a written complaint by interested person. In this regard, the local authority may initiate private or public consultation to verify the objections submitted and determine its response to the building application. You know, Mr. Speaker, the reason why this clause has been put in, because you know you have some people who live somewhere, even although the requirements state that you can build, some people are so jealous about where they live. They will probably raise unwarranted or unfounded objection. This is why the bill also, Mr. Speaker, allows the local authority, which will be the only agent of investigation. Nobody else can undertake that investigation outside of the local authority, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the clause 24 speaks to the power of the local authority to grant and refuse permit to any applicant for building permits. Clause 25 provides the exemption to the compliance provisions of the bill in circumstances where building work will be carried out on structures defined under the National Heritage Trust Act, national monument, or any protected national heritage, Mr. Speaker. This clause also set out the stringent procedures to be followed in this event, as well as the persons who are to act and to be responsible for the proposal, approval, and oversight of works to be done in these circumstances. Clause 25 also states the penalties for non-compliance. Clause 26 declares that a building permit cannot be transferred, is valid for a period of time issued, and is renewable within a prescribed circumstances once it expires, Mr. Speaker. While Clause 27 allows the permit holder to apply for its variation or modification, it also will, Mr. Speaker, state quite clearly that there must be stated reasons why you have fallen outside of the time issued and why you are then therefore seeking to have this revalidated. Clause 28 to 30 outline the circumstances and the procedure in which the local authority may suspend, revoke, and restore, respectively, any building permit that it issues. Clause 31 falls under Part 5 of the bill, which addresses the restriction on the changing of the use of the buildings. This clause, Mr. Speaker, penalizes any owner or occupant of a premises who changes its design without the permission of the local authorities. Mr. Speaker, and I spoke to that, where your people continue to turn residential homes into commercial activities, and some of the commercial activities are not conducive to the area that you live in. Right? Well, and you suffer that mainly yourself and the member from Eastern and other such areas. So, Mr. Speaker, there are serious provisions in the bill that will strengthen and to protect people's investment. Part 6 of the bill deals with enforcement, inspection, monitoring. Clause 32 defines for those purposes where an agent and the responsible party in relation to all building activities. Clause 33 to 34 give the local authorities the power to monitor all works for which it grants permission, and also to impose a duty on the permit holder to seek certification of compliance for each stage of a building project. Mr. Speaker, again, this clause of the bill gives greater protection, monitoring of work taking place. We have seen the collapse of buildings under construction because they were not abiding with the conditions. Right? Don't talk about whose time. It happened under your watch, so don't talk about it. Okay, so don't let us go there. This is not a political bill. Save the strength to respond to the bill. Right? Save your strength to respond to the bill. Mr. Speaker, Clause 35 allows the local authority to establish, among other things, guidelines for building permits, authorization for personnel to enter and inspect construction work, powers to survey buildings and standards for performance of functions by its officers. What this is saying, Mr. Speaker, no developer, whether big or small, no individual can prevent a legal officer to enter the premises to inspect the work that is being undertaken, Mr. Speaker. So you can't shut out the officers anymore by saying this is a private construction. It has happened where the officers have been refused entry. Then they got dogs. Well, if the pussy is dangerous. So, Mr. Speaker, the bill is giving real authority to local governance to monitor and to maintain strict control and discipline over buildings. Clause 36 establishes that a notice issued by a building permit holder or his agent in relation to any building work will be regarded as a prima facie evidence against the builder involved, while clause 37 prescribe civil penalty, that is to say fines for any permit holder or agent who fail to give due notice. Coming down, Mr. Speaker. Clause 38, empower building officers or authorized person to enter and inspect premises. With clause 39, make it an offense to any person to refuse. Dealt with that already. Clause 40, allow the local authority to serve notice on a responsible party, while clause 41 set out the ingredients of that notice. These include the nature of the breach, steps required to correct the breach, and the period of time in which these must be executed. No, it is all it is all bungled up, so I'm not going through all of it. Clause 45 established the power of the local authorities. As I said before, clause 43 stipulates that any person on whom a notice of breach is served is liable for the payment of fines to the local authorities if the notice is not complied with. This again is important, Mr. Speaker, members of the House. The local authorities will now have the power to institute the fine, set the fine for anyone who breaks the law, and that fine is payable to the local authority. Clause 44 gives the local authority power to issue stop notice where it suspects unauthorized works are being carried out. It also provides the definition of what unauthorized and what is unauthorized, and prescribe the context in which the context, form, and method of publication of the stop notice. This clause also provides penalty for failure to comply with a stop notice. It also makes it possible for the reasonable party who allege loss due to service of a stop notice to be compensated under clearly stated circumstances. Okay? And this again, member, is a game changer because it provides a level playing field for everybody. These are namely the local authorities if they have reasons to suspect that their unauthorized work are being carried out. Clause 45 gives the local authorities the power to issue enforcement notice where it suspects works being carried out or about to be carried out without a building permit. This clause also states that persons on whom the notice will be served, the nature of the breach, and the actions to be taken to correct it, and if so, determine the directive to cease all work at the premises concerned. Clause 45 outlines how it is to be observed in the publishing of the notice. Clause 46 states the conditions of the enforcement notice that have been met by the local authorities entitled to enter the premises. This clause also, Mr. Speaker, provides that the costs incurred for are recoverable in a resident magistrate's court, and the prescribed method and limitations of the appeal by the responsible party on which the enforcement notice was served. This clause also makes non-compliance with the enforcement notice an offense. And finally, we are seeing it now that once you ignore the notice, it now becomes a creature of the court. Clause 47 allows the local authority to seek court injunction where its enforcement notice is disregarded. 48, to serve emergency order on the owner or occupier of lands that is considered dangerous for a proposed or actual building work. Such an order may, among other things, require the owner or the person occupying such space to make the land safe and to cease all activity taking place on the premises, Mr. Speaker. Clause 49 set out the duration of the emergency order, while clauses 51 and 50 list the conditions in which the local authority may cancel the emergency order. Clause 51 also permits the local authority to enter premises and remedy violations where an emergency order has not been obeyed and where it has been unable to identify an owner for the premises. The local authorities may apply to the courts to recover the costs from the owner of the building, Mr. Speaker. Part 7 of the bill governs the treatment of a dangerous structure. Clause 52 provides the definition of a dangerous structure, as well as that of the owner of a dangerous structure. Clauses 53 and 54 deal respectively with the duty of the chief engineer officer to inspect any premises, consider potential or actual dangers, and the duty of the engineer to submit a certificate to the local authorities containing his professional opinion. Clause 55 emphasizes the actions to be taken by the local authorities if the building surveyor's certificate confirm the presence of a dangerous structure. Mr. Speaker, Clause 56 will outline the range of options available to the local authority if the owner or occupier fails to comply with the terms of the notice. These include the power to enter the offending premises, etc., and moreover, Clause 57 states how, where, and from whom the expense of the local authorities' intervention shall be recovered. Clause 58 gives the local authorities the power, after the approval by the court, to remove any occupier from a dangerous structure. Mr. Speaker, I want to emphasize this because I think this is an important bit of legislation. There are many buildings across this country which are falling down. In my own constituency, I have some. People refuse to come out of them because they claim that is where they live. They do have nowhere to go. But while that is taking place, these structures are creating a danger to life, danger to property. And what this bill is doing, Mr. Speaker, is to ensure that once the technical officers declare the building to be of that level of danger, that all the necessary steps will be taken to have the premises evacuated and demolished. Mr. Speaker, clauses 50 and 60, part 8 address that, Mr. Speaker, and also permits the minister to make regulations concerning the rights of building owners of these so-called the buildings that we're talking about, the whole buildings that we consider, member, to be posing a danger. Clause 61, Part 9 addresses the ministerial power to make regulations regarding building work to facilitate water harvesting and energy conservation. Again, Mr. Speaker, the bill not only is providing new regulations for how we build, but the bill has gone a step further to speak to energy conservation, to speak how as a country we can save on energy, cut the fuel bill. This bill provides the minister with the authority as it relates to regulation regarding building works to facilitate water harvesting and energy conservation. Clause 62, Part 10 deals with the appeal mechanism. This clause establishes the Building Appeals Tribunal, while clauses 63 and 4 addresses the grounds and the procedure for appeal, the duty of the tribunal, and the finality of the tribunal decision after the appeal is considered. Clause 65, Part 11 establish the Building Practitioners Board. This again is a game changer. Clause 66 lists the functions and powers of the board. This latter clause also empowers the minister, after due consultation through ministerial order, to prescribe the scope of building work that can be carried out by the building practitioner. This is not a power vested only in the minister. The minister will act on the advice of the technical persons who will form the basis of this board. Clause 67.
Minister Mackenzie, your time for presentation has expired. The minister may seek to permit you to proceed. To finish his bill.
Mr. Speaker, I ask the member be given sufficient time to complete his presentation, as long as he wants.
The motion is that the member be permitted insufficient time to finish his presentation. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Minister Mackenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to my colleagues. Although my neighbor from the south, congratulations on your victory. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Clause 67 mandates the minister to designate a person to be a registrar of the building practitioners. This person shall also be the secretary to the Building Practitioners Board. Clauses 68 and 69 requires that the registrar, among other things, maintain a current registry of the building practitioners, which is to be open to the public for inspection. The clause also lists the additional duties of the registrar and the board.
Just give it to him.
Clause 70
the Prime Minister.
requires every person who seeks to be licensed as a building practitioner to apply to the local authority. The authority is also required to submit the application to the Building Practitioners Board for consideration. Clause 71 outlines the options available to the Building Practitioners Board in considering any application, and its duty to advise the applicant of its decision in writing if the application is refused. The board must also advise the applicant of his right to appeal to the Building Appeal Tribunal as established by Clause 63. Clause 72 gives the board the discretion to grant a temporary license to persons who are not ordinary residents in Jamaica or temporarily visiting the island for teaching or research purposes in the subject of building and possesses sufficient experience and knowledge to effectively carry out building in a specialized area. This clause also specifies the duration of the temporary license shall not exceed 6 months. This clause also states that the holder of a temporary license is to be regarded as a building practitioner. Clause 73 makes it clear that a person cannot make a legal claim for compensation for any work done unless he is the holder of a license. This clause also confirms that a person whose license has been cancelled is not a license holder. So you can't make a claim if your license have been cancelled. You have to have an up-to-date license in order to make a claim. Clause 74 gives the Building Practitioner Board the power to cancel or to require a new application for a license once it has been determined that it was improperly obtained. This clause set out the conditions that constitute improper procurement of a license and the duty of the board to allow the accused person to be heard. Part 12 of the bill, clauses 75 and 76, is devoted to the Building Advisory Council. Mr. Speaker, Clause 75 established the council and lists its members, while Clause 76 states its function. Part 13, clauses 77 to 79, addresses the restriction of offense and penalties. Clause 77 outlines the restrictions on the title and activity on any person who is not a building professional or a building practitioner as recognized in this bill. Clause 78 specifies the procedure governing fixed penalties, fines, where the local authorities have determined that an offense has been committed. Importantly, Mr. Speaker, this clause also declares the liability of the offender comes to an end once the fine is paid as officially directed by the local authority, and that the monies so collected may be retained by the local building authority as a part of its fund. This will be an important stream of own source revenue for the municipal corporations. Clause 79 permits the use of a ministerial order once parliamentary approval is given to amend the first, second, and third schedule, and to specify the offense that attracts fixed penalties as well as the dollar value of these penalties. Clause 14, Part 14, Clause 80 to 85 covers the miscellaneous provisions of this bill. Clause 80 conditionally indemnifies building officers from personal liabilities of acts executed in good faith. Clauses 81 and 82 empowers the minister to make regulations to this legislation. Clauses 83 states that the binding powers of this act on the government, while Clause 84 amends the Jamaica National Heritage Trust Act. Clause 85 appeals the Kingston and St. Andrew Act and the Parish Council Building Act. Mr. Speaker, the Building Bill 2017 represents the most modern, standard-driven, and partnership-orientated approach to social and economic reality that have affected us as a country and have been affected by our built environment. It also, Mr. Speaker, continue to reaffirm and emphasize the role and structure of a revised local government system at the center of this transformation, Mr. Speaker. As the government implements economic transformation at the macro and microeconomic levels, this bill will facilitate community and national development in an orderly way, rather than the unplanned development and the social chaos which accompanies it. This bill, together with the Disaster Risk Management Act, will effectively facilitate disaster mitigation in the country and reduce the individual loss and the national economic shock due to natural occurrences. Mr. Speaker, it is with pleasure that I have the honor of opening, and with these few words, of opening the debate on the Building Bill of 2017. I thank you.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, we ask that the debate and the bill, Building Act be suspended until next week.
The motion that the debate on this order be suspended until next week. Those in favor? Those opposed? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, on the public business, the private members' motion number 2 and number 12, moved by the Member of Parliament from Central Kingston, will be taken. Mr. Speaker, I ask for the suspension of standing order to allow us to take. Huh? Well, what I get says the 12. Mr. Speaker, we ask for the suspension of standing order for the member from Central Kingston to take the private member's motion number 2 and 11. 12? Well, you tell me 12, I have 12, Madam 11.
Those in favour? Those opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. Tweed.
I really don't need it, Jim. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful for the time of the House to raise these two motions. I am obliged to note that motion number 11 was entered on the order paper on the 10th of January, and today is the 6th of June. And I'm craving the concern of all members and their advocacy for the distribution of some designated time for the hearing of debate of private members' motions. I'm grateful today that it has come at this early in the session, but I wish to advance to the House that we have not been giving enough time to these measures. The purpose of Parliament, Mr. Speaker, is not only to pass good laws, that is undoubtedly primary, but it is also to engage in discussions of policy where the representatives of the people can advance ideas, raise concerns, which will then be taken into account not only by the population, but also by the administration, and hopefully produce such changes as are necessary and such advances in thinking. Ideas have value, Mr. Speaker, and ideas which are canvassed as broadly as possible are of benefit to the wheel of the society. And therefore, I am concerned that we do have a designated, not a tokenistic time or an anachronistic time for the treatment of these bills. I'm very grateful, as I say, for today. And with your permission, I'd like to begin with the private member's motion listed at number 11 on the order paper. I realize there's some discrepancy in some editions of the paper that listed as number 12. Mr. Speaker, the motion reads, whereas the government is aware of the cruel effects of smoking tobacco and marijuana, and whereas the government has obligated the nation to the terms of the International Convention on Tobacco Control, and whereas domestic law has been altered regarding ganja use without any effective public education program regarding the health and social consequences of such use, particularly among school-age children and young people in general. And whereas tobacco use is still being portrayed as a socially acceptable habit without sufficient information and advocacy regarding the lethal effects of such use, be it resolved that this Honourable House address the grievous public health issues arising from tobacco and ganja use and resolve ways in which these dangers to life and productivity must be addressed. Mr. Speaker, the greatest cause of non-communicable diseases in the world is the abuse of tobacco and related drugs. This is a feature not only of other countries, but indeed costs the Jamaican taxpayer billions of dollars annually. And in addition, creates an instant threat to productivity, which is already on a low curve in this country. It is a reproach for us, Mr. Speaker, that the decline in total factor productivity and also in labor productivity alone has been on a downward curve since our independence. There will be no sustainable and equitable prosperity, Mr. Speaker, unless we can reverse that. And the use of tobacco and the consequential decline in health the deaths that inevitably occur, the distress and expense to families, the sorrow and social decline that follows from this use ought to be of primary concern to the representatives of the people here. Tobacco is a substance which modern science tells us produces one effect, inevitable effect. It causes the decline in health and eventually the death of its users. We have, in recent years, ascribed to the appropriate convention regarding tobacco use. However, we have not yet enacted comprehensive tobacco control legislation. And as a consequence, advertising continues. I saw a billboard advertising Matterhorn and Marlboro cigarettes recently in Jamaica, despite the regulations that we have bound ourselves with. And we are even now promoting, I believe, the new fields for tobacco growing in Jamaica. The government is to be commended in the increase in the taxation on tobacco products, which has been proven as the most effective way of suppressing use. But it hasn't gone far enough. And indeed, there are standards that the World Health Organization has set regarding appropriate levels of taxation for maximum efficiency, which we are yet to achieve. It is a deceit, Mr. Speaker, to justify the continued promotion or acquiescence of tobacco use on the basis that it provides jobs. The people who sell cigarettes on East Queen Street can be encouraged and must be encouraged and facilitated to find different things to sell, different occupations for them to ply, rather than to continue with this effort and this venture which has such deleterious effects. I'm particularly concerned, Mr. Speaker, with the inadequate attention that is being given to public education of school children. The statistics tell us that the average initiation for tobacco use is in the pre-teen years and the early teen years. And it is still considered to be a matter of style. It is still considered to be the chic thing to do to sport a cigarette. And even the ladies, I rely upon the observation of our guests from San Diego, but even young women are seen using grabber. And when that happens, they are unaware that they are betaking to themselves an addictive habit, which is going to be extremely difficult to break. It's going to cost them huge amounts of money, which they ought not to be spending, and to compromise their health. We have been inadequate, Mr. Speaker, in encouraging our young people not to go down the road of that habit. I'm aware of some of the graphic representation on the cigarette boxes. But instead of the billboard advertising some new brand of cigarette in Jamaica, I want to see the billboard showing a quailed penis. Because that is the effect of tobacco use, and that will be an effective educational effort. A quailed. Yes. No one wants that, not man or woman. And it is not irreverent for me to bring that to this parliament, because we need to be graphic. The representatives of the people must promote public health. We must not only expend great resources when we find that there is the consequences of these ill effects. I'm calling for an extensive program of public education, lifelong education, indeed propaganda, that will be in favor of tobacco cessation. Mr. Speaker, I've recently become aware that many of the counties in New York State, in the United States, are raising the age where a person can buy any tobacco product from 18 to 21, because they recognize how impressionable many people are in those years and how dangerous it is to their future and to the society when they fall prey to that habit. I wish to commend all of the members of this House who were participants and aides in the passing of the regulations regarding tobacco use some time ago, and I wish to pay, in his absence, particular credit to the member from Eastern St. Thomas, then Minister of Health, Dr. Fenton Ferguson, against whom a campaign was mounted to discredit him. Every argument was used about restraint of trade, adult choice, all of these spurious arguments. But he prevailed, and so did the representatives of the people at the time, and we must move from there into a program of comprehensive tobacco control legislation as provided for and committed to by our nation in the Tobacco Control Convention. Mr. Speaker, smoking anything is deleterious to your health. The same arguments regarding tobacco are to be adduced in relation to marijuana. Mr. Speaker, I was part of the government and the House which relaxed and changed elements of the dangerous drugs law to allow for medical ganja use and research, and for limited consideration of use, the reduction of penalties otherwise. But, Mr. Speaker, it is irresponsible for us to have done that and to fuel in any indirect way the public impression that weed is now free without the appropriate public education regarding the risks and dangers of the use of ganja. Mr. Speaker, I wish to refer in this regard to a publication put out by Time magazine. It's entitled Marijuana Goes Main Street. And indeed, it is a summary of a decisive study entitled Weed the People, Weed, W-E-E-D, The Future of Legal Marijuana in America by Bruce Barcott. And if you will allow me, I will quote simply the salient feature to support my argument about the need for public health, public education regarding the health risks. The quotation comes from a Harvard Medical School study, and it reads as follows. Science has also found clear indications that in addition to short-term effects on cognition, pot, that is ganja, can change developing brains, possibly affecting medical abilities and dispositions, especially for certain populations. The same drug that seems relatively harmless in moderation for adults appears to be risky for people under the age of 21, whose brains are still developing. Quote, it has a whole host of effects on learning and cognition that other drugs don't have. It looks like the earlier you start, the bigger the effects. I am most concerned, the head of the National Institute on Drug Abuse in the United States writes, I am most concerned about possibly harming the potential of our young people. That could be disastrous for our country. Mr. Speaker, the same argument applies here. I will not forget that after the amendments to the dangerous drugs law that I adverted to and that we passed, being confronted by a group of students at a prominent Kingston High School who were going into examinations and who were busily puffing a spliff because they felt very sure that by doing so their brains would be clear, their wisdom would be enhanced, and that they would do better in their examinations. That may seem silly to us, but there is a current consideration that weed is now free in Jamaica and that anyone can use it. And I'm concerned that, fully recognizing all of the cultural and sometimes religious considerations regarding ganja use, it is incumbent upon the government and we as responsible representatives of the people to afford and mount a sustained campaign of public education which gives young people the basis on which they can make a choice, both in relation to marijuana and tobacco. Mr. Speaker, I am recommending to the Minister of Health and to the government that they call together the universities, the public health specialists, to craft an effective program and to ensure that it is properly funded so that we don't pick up multiplied costs on the other end of persons, unproductive people, sick people, people easy, or probably prone to early demise, when they have been allowed by their ignorance, or they have been encouraged by their ignorance, to engage in these life-damaging habits. Mr. Speaker, I commend these considerations to the House, and I hope that others will contribute to it, and that, in fact, we may see the requisite public education, which is the only responsible thing that the House of Representatives can do to follow in short order. May it please you.
Do we have any other speaker? Mr. Tweed, before you close, I'm going to invite you to go back to the Hansard when this House was making ganja almost free to those children. And what I said, warning you as Minister of Education, that I am the warner man, but where I am, don't give me the privilege to speak on that matter today. But I told you so. Minister, are you speaking or not?
Mr. Speaker, I ask that the debate on the private member's motion be suspended until next week.
Those in favor? Those against? Ayes have it. Mr. Tweed, go ahead, yes.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I will, please allow me to consult you privately so I can better understand your remarks earlier. Mr. Speaker, the motion listed at number 2 on the private member's motion list on page 10 of the order paper reads as follows. Whereas many Jamaicans are underqualified in mathematics and science, whereas mathematics and scientific competencies are essential to job creation and national growth, and whereas the nation's best hope for development and global competitiveness is to become a people renowned for educational excellence and 21st century skills, be it resolved that this Honourable House debate the measures required to improve the standard of performance in mathematics and science. Mr. Speaker, Jamaica has a math phobia. It is a traditional and historical fact of life, a constant of our history, that we believe that mathematics is hard, that it is only for people of a certain mental disposition, and that you can gain progress in life without expertise or at least competence in mathematics. Mr. Speaker, it is indisputable also that mathematics is a gateway to science, and science is a portal through which the majority of jobs in the 21st century are going to be created. And therefore, it must be of great interest to and concern of this Honourable House that our standards of mathematics are not what they ought to be to keep us competitive and to provide the satisfaction that individuals require. Uniformly, our results in mathematics are about 20% behind our results in English in the external examinations and the internal examinations at the various stages of our educational system. Our boys are particularly affected, Mr. Speaker, because they too lag considerably behind our girls, both at the level 4, the grade 4, the GSAT, and the CSEC and CAPE examinations. Mr. Speaker, the reasons for this should not elude us. The fact is that the recent results of the grade 4 examination, the last sitting, has indicated a decline. I think it's about 6% in the levels of competency in mathematics. It is a difficulty that we have, which has percolated through generations of process in agriculture into our teaching profession. A survey that I did some years ago, Mr. Speaker, indicated that only about 11% of our teachers of mathematics at the CSEC and the CAPE level were qualified in terms of their certified achievements, both in the content of mathematics and in the methodology of teaching. It is indeed surprising that our students do so well, despite, and I'm disparaging no one. Many of them have been asked to teach to fill vacancies without having the required qualifications. Some 40% of our primary school teachers of mathematics, never pass math. Efforts have been made over time to redress this situation, but the truth is that the methods of teaching mathematics have largely become outdated. They are taught abstractly, and certainly for our young boys, and for many of our girls, they find no attractiveness in the learning of theorems and their application, when they would rather understand the principles of mathematics in far more practical and hands-on areas, Mr. Speaker. The distribution of our mathematics teachers has also provided a problem, because in many cases where they are most needed, they are not assigned. There is a well-known high school in St. Catherine where a student body of near 2,000 has the benefit of 17 students, or had 2 years ago, the benefit of 17 teachers who were qualified as guidance counselors and receiving appropriate pay, and only 3 who were similarly qualified in mathematics. The rigidity of contract that affects our teaching profession inhibits the proper distribution of even those specialized teachers. The fact also that mathematics specialists are easily weaned into the private sector and to employment opportunities outside of teaching is of great moment. Because unless you have a system where you can reward scarce skills, then you are always going to have a difficulty where the excellent teachers and the low-grade teachers receive the same remuneration. There is no justice in that, Mr. Speaker. And this inhibits even when we train, as many as we try to do in the education system, they are easily weaned from within the profession outside. Not to mention, as you know, sir, the fact that our teaching profession, and particularly our expert teachers in mathematics and science, have in fact been subject to the allurement of migration. They have been offered posts in the United States, in the United Kingdom. We can't stop them. What we have to do is to incentivize people to stay. There is much appreciation for the fact that the government has continued with a program of scholarships for students who wish to specialize in mathematics education. This is good, but unfortunately, it is really not adequate for the situation, and it carries over into the area of science. 3 years ago, Mr. Speaker, while there were almost 50,000 students taking CSEC examinations at grade 11, the normal terminus of the secondary school system, only 5,400 or so of that nearly 50,000 took even one science subject, because the difficulties of the appropriate qualification and teaching of mathematics spills over into the science subjects. This is a critical issue for Jamaica's development. There will be no 5 in 4, there will be no sustained development, there will be more applications for work permits unless we are going to, in the shortest order, transform ourselves into a knowledge and skills-based economy and society. The scholarships that are given are good, but they take long to mature, and I'm not sure that the system of bonding is foolproof. Incentives are needed to encourage our teachers. Virtual courses in mathematics need to be promoted, and the same true for generally underserved subjects. Productivity that we seek to reverse, as I mentioned in my presentation in the earlier motion, Mr. Speaker, requires competence in mathematics. Even the recent EduFocus table, which spoke of the number of school leavers who get the matriculable standards at 5 CSEC subjects. Mr. Speaker, the member to whom this unfortunate accident just happened and I have a common complaint that people of our complexion blush very easily. Look at him blushing, and I'm sure that the House accepts his regret that of his yes, indeed. You see, Mr. Speaker, the member from Central Clarendon has this vast lexicon, you know. I don't think he even knows how to spell Redibo, but the alliteration is probably correct, and we accept the designation with pride. Mr. Speaker, then, what this motion calls for is a national plan for redressing our default in mathematics and science. It calls for this House to debate and for the appropriate ministries and departments to fashion and to implement the appropriate incentives, the opportunities for using technology to improve our skills in science and mathematics, and the flexibility of approach which will attract and maintain the interest and ultimately the competence of our students. Mr. Speaker, we must stop teaching math and science for examinations that relate to our competencies and not to the 21st century individual and national needs. I commend the issue to the attention of the House, and thank you.
Mr. Chuck.
Mr. Speaker, let me commend the member from Central Kingston in bringing this motion. There's absolutely no doubt, Mr. Speaker, that mathematics is a major challenge to students at all levels. And there has to be a national effort to really boost the learning and the practice, everything to do with mathematics. Because right across every school, mathematics, regrettably, is not well taught, is not well provided for the students. The simple truth, Mr. Speaker, is that unless we become proficient in mathematics, we are not going to be proficient in the sciences, and we are not going to be proficient in research methodology. And it is very important, Mr. Speaker, that from an early age, we really encourage our young students to really love mathematics and the sciences. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, at Kingston College, my headmaster then, Douglas Forrest, literally sought out people to push them into the sciences. And even though he was a French graduate, he taught mathematics on weekends and in the evenings because he wanted students to be proficient in mathematics, because he felt that mathematics and the sciences were the way forward. And I say, Mr. Speaker, my headmaster taught me mathematics. I was very proficient in mathematics. And then he tried to teach me French, and he failed. And in fact, I mean, Mr. Speaker, the one subject I've never been able to understand, to be able to pass is French. But mathematics, I was always proficient. And Mr. Speaker, in my early teaching days, I taught mathematics. And I must tell you, member from Central Kingston, I always believe you can't teach mathematics. You literally cannot teach mathematics. And when I taught mathematics at Holy Childhood and also at the university, the main consideration is you have to get students to love it and to love to solve problems. So the best teacher I had was a fellow known as John Bars, who never taught. He just came in. He had a dog that sat beside him. And he will sit down and he will look at the students and said, "You have any problem? If you don't have any problem, I will give you some." And he would put the problems up on the notice board, and all of us had to try to solve the problems. And the point, Mr. Speaker, is that mathematics is really very simple in principles. A theorem is easy to learn. But when you come to solving problems to show the theorem in practice, that is where the difficulty arises. And the only way, Mr. Speaker, for you to really become proficient in understanding how the theorem is at work is by practice, practice, practice. So, Mr. Speaker, not only was I successful personally, because I recognized that any piece of paper I could find, I would be solving mathematics problems on. And in the days of JOS, I used to solve problems on the bus tickets. On the bus tickets. And Mr. Speaker, indeed, my first degree, as many of you may know, was in special mathematics. But, and indeed, that is correct. I mean, if I had stayed in mathematics, it would have been up, 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 rather than down, down, as happened. But, Mr. Speaker, the point, member from Central Kingston, one of the difficulties I have seen with mathematics teacher is that they're trying to teach the principles when in a classroom, and if you have 40 minutes, 5 minutes should be spent, this is the principle, the next 35 minutes, giving problems to the students so that the students can try to solve the problems to see the problem at work. In many ways, Mr. Speaker, my headmaster used to teach not only mathematics, but he also used to teach tennis. And if you will understand this, Mr. Speaker, it's easy to teach how to play forehand. But until you go out there and play hundreds of forehands, you will never become proficient at hitting a forehand. And it is the same with the backhand, the serve, everything. And that, Mr. Speaker, is the case with mathematics. If you want to become proficient in any area of mathematics, you have to solve dozens of problems. And after you solve dozens of problems, it becomes second nature. From you see the problem, the solution actually comes in your head before you even put it down on paper. And I can say this, Mr. Speaker, because I remember when I did GCE, O-levels. We had 1.5 hours to do the paper, and in 15 minutes I was finished. And that was arithmetic, algebra, 20 minutes. Geometry, 1 hour. Clearly I won. Clearly I won. And all I'm really saying, Mr. Speaker, if we just advise our teachers, don't teach mathematics. Get the students to solve problems. Because all mathematics books, 90% of it is listing problems that the students are to solve. So you just get the students to solve the problems, and when you solve a problem, there's a sense of euphoria. And that is what you need to be able to encourage students with simple problems. They start to love mathematics, and the more difficult problems, when they challenge and they overcome the difficult problems, they really feel good, and then mathematics becomes second nature. So I would like member to support you, but to encourage all good mathematics teachers, and believe me, I've known many. Dr. Claude Packer, he and I studied on campus together. We taught mathematics together. Chain Nut campaign, we were on campus together. We solved problems together. And the basic to love mathematics and to be successful. Indeed, I can tell you, all the students that I've taught over the years, to the best of my knowledge, I've done well. Because to the extent that I say, I have nothing to teach you, here's a problem, tell me the difficulty you're having, and over time they come to love the mathematics. And I can name many examples, but I won't. So, Mr. Speaker, this motion must be supported, and we hope from here on what the members propose, a national effort with mathematics and the sciences that we undertake, because this is necessary for Jamaica to move forward.
Mr. Speaker.
Yes, member, you may proceed.
Yes, I rise to support the motion moved by the Honourable member from Central Kingston. As someone who, yes, may I be granted permission to speak from some place other than my seat?
Yes, you may go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. As someone who has just moved from the classroom as principal, I have seen the many challenges that we have had as a principal of a high school. What we have seen, Mr. Speaker, is a challenge where many of the students who come into the school at the primary level are not fully prepared. And I would want this Honourable House to support, and the Ministry of Education on a whole to support the motion where specialist teachers are placed in the primary schools, where the concepts and the methods can be taught thoroughly. Because what we're seeing is a halfway house where the students are placed in the high schools and they don't have the proper concept, the methodology to move on. And that is what is causing the problems as it relates to, after the 5 years of high school level, that they are not able to master the concept to do well at the CSEC level. So the motion I support quite fully, and I want us as a house to endorse this and to look at the possibility of having specialist mathematics teachers placed in the primary schools so these concepts can be taught thoroughly. I thank you. Tony.
Mr. Henry.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, mine is going to be a very short intervention. We look at effects sometimes before we go to the causes. And indeed, the historical development of our education system has not enhanced mathematics to be liked by us. I listened to my colleague friend, and I would point out as I quickly went into this computer that I travel with, which is now called an iPhone. And I've gone to it because I've brought up right here when I speak to mathematics and the teaching of any subject is the methodology of approach. Our people were locked out of learning and schools for a long time. We still have an inability to access schools that would improve this. So what do I heard when I heard my colleague? I turned to the abacus, called a counting frame, which is a calculating tool that was in use in Europe, China, and Russia centuries before the adoption of the written Hindu-Arabic numeral system, and is still used by merchants, traders, clerks. And it goes on to how it explains that this is the beginning of a computer. Just as today methodology for teaching maths has moved from one country to the next, so that you end up with a methodology, for instance, of the Singapore type approach to mathematics, which also had to overcome the idea of two languages. And languages were the perception by which we move forward many of the educational structure of our system. So I say that to say, unless the methodology of how the books we choose, training the teachers who are going to train the subject matter, and making the subject matter attractive and relative. I will close with one simple exercise. it's all one-on-one, dollars and cents, was pounds, shillings, and pence once. But if you're going to take a child in school and says that 2 apples cost 10 cents each, firstly, is it 10 cents Jamaica or 10 cents US? And if the apple is actually 20 cents down the road in practical aspect of life, immediately the child must have a mistrust in what you're teaching. Because even the mathematics books that we're beginning to use or continuing to use do not themselves contain the realism aspect of what happens in the daily life. If you tell a child a bun costs 10 cents, plus the butter costs 5 cents, added to it, but when he goes to the shop, the bun is 50 cents and the butter is a different price, you immediately continue to place in the child that mistrust which the Anglo-Saxon method of education has passed on to us. Therefore, the methodology of training must be to look at it. Is it the Singapore model today that is like successful, which makes them number one? Is it the Korean model? Is it the combination of the Korean and the Singapore model and the methodology of teaching, which has to begin in how you train your teachers and by extent extend it to the home? All of these are the issues which makes it a very complex position to resolve in the shortest possible time. I laud the presentation because it's a more important element. But then equally, your authors, your writers, all the people who compile it has to be doing it against a method of teaching the subject matter and how it will be absorbed by practical explanation in the schools. So my intervention is to look at it more historically and what we have to change fundamentally in the educational system, which I think my colleague addressed. If the mathematics teacher has an attractive way to appeal, if we were using music that the children could recognize with rather than some of the issues that didn't, that they are exposed today. So it's the methodology and the approach that is one of the aspects of it. But please remember the historical concept. I used to marvel, since we go some historically, at how when my father was a bookkeeper would give out somewhere to cut at the pound, shillings, and pence. And if you gave the man a square of the cane to cut, he could tell you to the father whether you have underpaid him or overpaid him by his method of how he puts the limb here, how he moves the machete here, etc. So the issue of it is that we have not drawn on our culture and our history enough to also overcome, because it's all well and good to speak, but 4 people sleeping in a bed with no light. All the methodologies too and everything else needs to be addressed in the structure of a society. So it's a holistic approach that I am preaching that relates to it. And again, I come back to it. The Chinese are known for the knowledge of the thing because they don't fear the subject, because they were born exposed to the abacus. The abacus is the beginning. Right now, how are you going to tell a child about mathematics when this is here? Right now, we might be reprimanding the child for going on here and solving a mathematics while he's in class. So the whole issue has changed dramatically, and we have not changed with the system while correcting the errors we have committed in the past. I hail the resolution. I hail us to recognize that you still pick up the school books, and you still see the farmer portrayed with a bag of wood on his head on a donkey, while the lawyer is behind a desk. Who do you want to aspire to be? So that agriculture becomes less attractive overall. We must begin to change the subjects by which we teach, the way in which we teach, and make them more culturally relative to our country. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I could not resist participating in this debate. The member from Central Kingston, unfortunately, I was not a mathematician, but the member from Central Kingston being a former Minister of Education, and I myself being a former Minister of Education, I'm certain we both hold this subject near and dear to our hearts. The member is right in asking for the House to debate measures to improve mathematics performance in schools. But I would want to remind the member that almost 10 years ago, this House would have debated and put in place measures through the Education Transformation Project to improve mathematics performance, and that significant investments were in fact made in developing an entire teaching stream to improve mathematics performance. Indeed, my recollection is, member, that we put in place a national coordinator for mathematics, we also put in place a system of measuring national mathematics outcomes at the primary level. That ran parallel to the grade 4 literacy test. So what we did, and I'm speaking what I did as Minister of Education, was to bring to national attention the importance of mathematics by creating a national test, which would be the grade 4 numeracy test. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, more emphasis, well, not unfortunately, but what was necessary at the time was to improve literacy performance, and therefore we placed greater emphasis on the national attainment of universal literacy, which the last time I checked, Mr. Speaker, we are very much close to achieving universal literacy at the primary level. The emphasis now must be on universal numeracy. That will take some time. And I'm not speaking now with definitive statistics. The last time I checked, we were in the region of about 60% of students, attaining mastery at numeracy in the national numeracy exams at grade 4. That is not satisfactory, but Mr. Speaker, it was better than where we were 10 years ago. So we have seen improvements. I would suggest to the member that, yes, we need to redouble our efforts, look at new measures, but we need to support the measures that already exist. I would also say, Mr. Speaker, in joining with the member, that a large part of the problem is cultural. Yes, we have problems with having the teachers trained, with the pedagogy employed, but a large part of it is the fear of math. It's the cultural transmission from parent to child. And that cultural transmission of the fear comes in many forms. You don't need mathematics to succeed. You know, math is too complicated. All kinds of psychosocial transmissions from parents to children are done. And that, Mr. Speaker, helps to create within the minds of the students that math is either too hard or not necessary. Mr. Speaker, math is the universal language, and every Jamaican should be conversant in it. My view, Mr. Speaker, is that presently we make it contingent that a child would only be able to sit the GSAT examination if they have attained mastery at the grade 4 literacy test. We are not yet at the point where we can make promotion contingent on numeracy attainment. I think we may have to wait another 5 years till we are in the 70s. But I am giving an opinion, which prime ministers can't give opinions, but in this House, I think the direction of public policy in this matter should be towards making the promotion of the child to sit GSAT contingent on attaining numeracy. There is a Minister of Education who is not a member of the lower house, but will speak on the matter. I am giving my advanced opinion on this matter. But generally speaking, Mr. Speaker, I support the resolution. It is a good resolution, and I want to again join the member in other comments that he made. The purpose of Parliament is not only to pass laws, but it is also to debate policy positions, and it is always a very good experience when members of Parliament can add their voice to policy and see policy eventually translate into programs and into laws. May it please you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes,
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just want to make a very small intervention in support of this resolution by the member from Central Kingston. And I also want to look at the points made by the member from Northeast St. Andrew in talking about principles. Because if one does not understand the concepts, and I recall my former maths teacher at St. Mary High School, the one late Mrs. Cargill, her constant talk was about the concepts, same principles, the concept of understand what you're talking about. And the Prime Minister mentioned about fear of parents in mathematics, but part of the challenge we have in schools, and the member indicated in terms of the percentage of teachers who teach mathematics who did not pass mathematics at CSEC to be teaching mathematics, is that there's a general fear out there of maths, and that is passed on to the students. Hence, you can understand they're wanting to shy away from that particular subject in school or not doing anything at all. I recall, Mr. Speaker, before the change of profession, my wife used to teach maths at St. Mary High School. And she had to be teaching lines of latitude and longitude, and for children to understand what it's about. And that day at school, she took 2 oranges and a knife and simply explained to the students basically what we were talking about in the book. The orange being the earth or the globe, and then latitude, whichever way you cut it. And the children end up having a better understanding of it at the end of the day than just looking through the book and trying to appreciate it. Point I want to make, Mr. Speaker, is that part of teaching science and mathematics that you have to bring it down to everyday examples so that students can have a better appreciation and retain what is there that you're teaching about. The challenge we have in trying to address this particular concern in the country, Mr. Speaker, is not only to get the committed mathematics teacher, which is important, but it's going to take a very long time because we have to start addressing the basic concept, the fear as to why people do not want to do mathematics and the fear of really appreciating how important it is. So I think in the discussions that will certainly go along, even after this debate has closed, is how do we address some of those issues? And it has to start at the very basic level, at the early childhood institution, member, at primary schools, at high schools. And interestingly, we are going to have to be churning out a new set of teachers to be able to undertake this revival which is needed so that we can get maths and science on the road. Mr. Speaker, I think is a task that is not insurmountable, and it's something that we need to do post-haste. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Tweed.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I hope you'll agree with me, sir, that the quality of discourse in this matter has been to the credit of the House and hopefully the benefit of our people in the short and indeed the long run. I very much appreciated the comments of the Minister of Justice and wish to tell him of a story. In fact, something I observed in a prominent high school, not Kingston College, where a math teacher was having problems in engaging his
Mr.
students.
Speaker, can I ask the member, the Minister of State and the Minister of Education, Youth and Information wishes to make a contribution, so he's asking if he could do that next week. So we ask for suspension of item number 2 until next week.
Certainly, Mr. Speaker.
The motion is that the debate be suspended until next week. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? As are.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for recommittal of the item bills brought from the Senate.
Those in favor? Aye. Those against? As of it. Bills brought from the Senate.
The following is a message from the President of the Senate to the Honourable House of Representatives. I have the honour to advise the Honourable House of Representatives that on the 2nd day of June 2017, the following bills were passed in the Senate. A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Companies Act passed with 27 amendments, and a bill entitled An Act to repeal the Criminal Justice Plea Negotiations and Agreements Act and make new provisions for a system of plea negotiations and plea agreements and for connected matters passed with 71 amendments, for which the Honourable Senate desires the concurrence of this Honourable House. Signed, Thomas Tavares Finson, QC, CD, JP, President of the Senate.
Mr. Smuda.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, I now move that the Senate amendments to the bill shortly entitled the Companies Amendment Act 2017 be now considered and approved.
Those in favor? Aye. Those against? As of it.
Mr. Speaker, I now move that the Senate amendments to the bills shortly entitled the Plea Negotiations Agreements Act 2017 be now considered and approved. But before you do so, Mr. Speaker, before the Honourable House approve, may I just thank the Senate and also, Mr. Speaker, the Office of Parliamentary Counsel, the Attorney General's Chambers, and the House, Mr. Speaker, for being able to deal with 71 amendments. And so this bill was brought expeditiously, Mr. Speaker, to the House this evening because of its urgency. And the urgency, Mr. Speaker, is because in the Circuit Court, for the Easter term between April and July this year, we have in excess of 2,000 cases to be tried. With the best will in the world, if we try to try them, we won't finish them for the next 5 years. The Home Circuit, Mr. Speaker, alone has 707 cases to be tried this term. St. Catherine has 349, but maybe more than that now. Clarendon 186, St. James 205. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the agencies for bringing this bill, because as soon as it is passed, signed by the GG, Mr. Speaker, we want this plea bargaining bill to start operating right away so that the backlog in the courts can be addressed. Without this, Mr. Speaker, we are going to have the continuing confusion, chaos, and general overloading of the court system. And in due course, Mr. Speaker, we hope to roll out how this plea bargain will be effective in our courts. So I want to thank the agencies and thank the House for in support of the approval from the Senate.
Those in favor? Those against? As of it. Amendment approved.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for recommittal of public business.
Public business. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At public business, I wish to draw the attention of the House to a minor amendment to a bill that we had already debated, which was the Defence Act in creating a National Service Corps. But in Section 3C, there is reference to a service corps to be known as a National Service Corps. The experts feel that there is a bit of redundancy in the statement, and so the suggestion is that we change it to a body of soldiers to be known as the National Service Corps. Just a matter of language and tidying up. I therefore ask that the House consider and approve this very minor amendment. Right, so instead of saying a service corps to be known as the National Service Corps. In other words, you can't use a word to define itself. So a body of soldiers to be known as the National Service Corps.
Prime Minister, wouldn't they, my understanding is that these would be trainees, in other words, would they have qualified as soldiers as such?
Are they, I have a little problem, Mr. Speaker. Are they truly soldiers? I was just wondering if but cadets are soldiers?
Member, so not to reopen the entire debate, but the idea is for 1 year, the intake of recruits will go through a program called the National Service Corps. During that 1 year, they will be trained in soldiering, in everything to do with soldiering. After that 1 year, they could decide whether or not they will join one of the other existing regiments, whether it is they could decide to join the reserve, they could decide to go into the full force, or they could decide to leave and become firemen or become security guards or go and do anything else they want. But in keeping with the suggestion from the member from Central Kingston, we have to find a way to get more young people into the army. So they do 1 year of basic training. That's it. After that, they can decide whether they become full soldiers, that is, they join one of the regiments, or they decide to go elsewhere. That's it. So you have a National Service Corps. You also have what we call the reserves, and then you have the regular service corps, which would be the Jamaica Regiment, the Engineering Regiment, and the Support Battalion.
Those in favor of the amendment? Aye. Those against? As of it. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, before I move for the adjournment of the House, I believe you have something to read into the records of the House.
Members, I wish to bring to the attention of the House that Lady Cook, wife of one of our late Governor General, has passed. She passed yesterday, June 5th. We want to take note of her passing and to announce that next week, Tuesday, when we meet, we'll pay tribute to her life in this House.
Mr. Speaker, is not intended to do any further business for the day, so I ask that the House be adjourned until next Tuesday at 2 p.m.
Before I put the resolution, I wish to again take note of the students and to congratulate them. For staying the course, and they have learned and see everything that could happen in the House happen today. Congratulations to them. The motion is that the House be now adjourned until next week. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? As of it. This Honourable House now stands adjourned.
Hi, I'm Doug Hollywood Gore. I'm a professional race car driver here in Jamaica, and I'm here to talk to you about road safety today. Hi, so we're off on the way to Iron Shore to go and look at one of the reasons why this is one of the major crash hotspots here in Montego Bay. So here in Iron Shore on the dual carriageway, this is what happens a lot of time. Cars are bobbing and weaving in and out of traffic. They're going faster than they're supposed to. All of a sudden now, they've caused themselves a major accident, gone off into the bush, and a lot of times, big fatalities right here in Montego Bay.
I must be the proudest Jamaican ever. And I am proud because I believe, I know that Jamaica is the nicest place on this earth. This beautiful country, just live in peace and harmony, walk and talk with the neighbor, tell them morning and don't feel like say, of course we are them. I would love for it to be the Jamaica that I think is the best place on earth. Come make we create a safer Jamaica.
A message from the Ministry of National Security.
Miracle Revival Hour is on PBC Jamaica, this and every Sunday at 7 a.m. with a repeat at 8:30 p.m. Come for the worship, stay for the word. That's Miracle Revival Hour, Sunday at 7 a.m. with a repeat at 8:30 p.m.
Do you notice that every time God gives you a victory, another battle comes up? And the other battle is worse than the first. But the same God who took you through the Jordan will carry you through the Jericho.
Come for the worship, stay for the word. That's Miracle Revival Hour, Sundays at 7 a.m. with a repeat at 8:30 p.m.
When you feel like giving.
Wait, hold on. Colin, hey, what go on? You know, say, I'm on my way to go look about the farm work program. Aye, I love to do the farm work program there, you know. But remember, me serve a 5-year prison sentence for a minor crime. Them can't clear it, you know.
Yes, Colin can get his record expunged. Expungement is having a conviction removed from your criminal record after certain specifications have been met. Visit the Criminal and Civil Justice Division in the Ministry of Justice for more information.
Hello everyone, welcome to another exciting language arts lesson. Today we will be looking at the strand phonics. I know that you love phonics. I do too. So let's get right to it. We have been looking at the story, The Bun Shop. It is there in your reading text. I know that you love that story. And so we will be looking at some of the words that are in the story. We want to be able to identify the words and we want to be able to pronounce them correctly. So you're going to listen to me and we are going to be engaging in some exciting activities. Let us look at our objectives for today. At the end of the lesson, students should be able to 1. Pronounce words with the ed ending correctly. 2. Use word wall to identify rhyming words and spell sight words. 3. Demonstrate the use of word sorts to categorize words with the same ed ending. And 4. Read at least 5 sentences from the text which contain words ending with ed. Now, boys and girls, I want for you to scan your reader quickly and see how many words that end with ed you can identify. I have done it already, but I am going to give you the opportunity to do so. So take a minute. Here is my list. What do you notice about the list that I have here on the screen? Yes, boys and girls, they are all verbs. And we know that verbs are action words or doing words. Also, they are all ending with ed. Okay, boys and girls, remember we are looking at how to pronounce ed. I have a few questions I want for you to bear in mind during the lesson. Here they are. What do we know about adding ed to the end of verbs? Does ed always sound the same when placed at the end of verbs? How many different sounds there are? What are they? I know that you are anxious to tell me the answers to these questions. However, I do know that some of us don't know the answers, and so we are going to be learning a lot so that we can answer these questions at the end. Let us continue. There are 3 sounds to the ed when placed at the end of verbs. Did you know that? I know that you did. Do you know the sounds? Well, let me tell you. Ed can say id. I says I, and D says d. When put together, they say id. The second sound, ed, can say d. The letter D says d. And the third sound, ed, can say t. Did you know that? Yes, boys and girls, there are 3 sounds, id, d, and t. Follow closely, listen carefully, and join with me. We are going to be learning a lot today. Now, boys and girls, I want for you to get your musical instruments in hand because we are going to be singing a song. Now, this song is to the tune, Sammy plant piece of corn down a gully. You know that tune? Yes, let us do it now. Pronouncing final ed is very easy. Pronouncing final ed is very easy. There are 3 sounds. There are 3 sounds to remember. There are 3 sounds. There are 3 sounds to remember. Id, d, and t are the 3 sounds. Id, d, and t are the 3 sounds. You must know them and use them correctly. You must know them and use them correctly. Now, you're going to join in with me. Let us go. 1, 2. Pronouncing final ed is very easy. Pronouncing final ed is very easy. There are three sounds. There are three sounds to remember. There are three sounds. There are three sounds to remember. Id, d, and t are the three sounds. Id, d, and t are the three sounds. You must know them and use them correctly. You must know them and use them correctly. Did you enjoy yourself as much as I did? Oh, yes, you did. Wonderful. Let us continue, because I know that you want to do some practice. For us to remember when to use these sounds correctly, we must bear in mind a few rules. Let us look at the first rule. The past tense ending sound id is only used with verbs that end with a t or d sound. When added, it creates the sound of another syllable. For example, the verb want, want, becomes the past tense verb wanted, which is pronounced wanted, forming two syllables, want and id, wanted. Let's try another one. The verb need, need, becomes needed, a past tense verb, and is pronounced needed, forming two syllables, need and id, needed. The verb decide, decide, becomes the past tense verb decided, decided, forming three syllables, decided. Let's try another one. The verb dedicate, dedicate, becomes the past tense verb dedicate, and is pronounced dedicated, forming four syllables, dedicated, dedicated. Remember, boys and girls, you can tell how many syllables a word contains by simply placing your hand beneath your chin and count the number of times your chin goes down. Say the word dedicated slowly. How many times your hand went down? Yes, boys and girls, 4 times, indicating to us that there are 4 syllables in that word. Now, let me do it for you. Dedicated. You see, my chin went down 4 times. So, there are 4 syllables in that word. Have you been learning so far? I know you are. Let us continue to the next sound. Now, boys and girls, for this sound, we have to know about what is voiced sounds. Voiced sounds are those sounds that cause the throat to vibrate. By touching your throat, you will feel vibrations as you make these sounds. Do it along with me. Put your hand on your throat. Repeat after me. B, D, G, Z, V, L, R, Z, J. Did you feel the vibrations? Oh yes, our throat vibrated for all of those sounds. Therefore, all of these sounds are voice sounds. Your throat vibrates because your voice is on. The second rule that we are going to be looking at says the ED ending of voiced sounds takes on a D sound when placed at the end of verbs. Here are some examples. The verb clean, clean, becomes the past tense verb cleaned, cleaned, and is pronounced cleaned, having only one syllable. The next example, the verb dream, dream, becomes the past tense verb dreamed, and is pronounced dreamed, having only one syllable. A few other examples. The verb save, save, becomes saved, and is pronounced saved, having only one syllable. Let us pause here. Notice the verb save. A E is at the end of the verb. When we add ed to it, we drop the E. Therefore, the past tense verb saved is spelled saved. Let us continue. The verb enjoy, enjoy, becomes the past tense verb enjoyed, and is pronounced enjoyed, having two syllables still. Try that one. Put your hand beneath your chin and say enjoy. Enjoy. Two syllables. So when we add ed to that word, we have two syllables still. Let us continue. The verb worry, worry, becomes the past tense verb worried, and is pronounced worried, having two syllables still. Let us look carefully at this verb again. Worry, worry, ends with a Y. And as you know already, we change the Y to I before adding the ending. So our past tense verb worried is spelled worried.
I would like to wake up one morning when the police are just doing traffic duties and keeping the peace, and they don't have to worry about even their own security. Take responsibility for yourself and your surroundings and for your neighbors. Be your neighbor's keeper. Be your brother's keeper. Let's come together and create a safer and prosperous Jamaica.
A message from the Ministry of National Security.
Hi, this is Nestor Carter. I'm the 5th fastest man in the world over the 100 meter, gold medalist, Olympic gold medalist and world championship. You're watching PBCJ, the People's Station.
Okay, boys and girls, we are now going to be looking at our final ED ending sound. Remember that there are 3 sounds. We already looked at id and d. So we are going to be moving on to our final sound. Anyone remembers? Ah, I know you do. Now, we have to learn about unvoiced or voiceless sounds before we can look at the last sound. Voiceless consonants at the end of words do not use the voice. You will feel no vibrations at your throat. Instead, just a short explosion of air as you pronounce these sounds. Put your hand on your throat and repeat after me. P, t, k, s, sh, ch. Let us do it again. P, t, k, s, sh, ch. Have you noticed that there were no vibrations? Wonderful. Your throat does not vibrate because your voice is off. That is why we call it unvoiced or voiceless sounds. Now let us look at the rule, the last rule. The ED ending of unvoiced or voiceless sounds take on a t sound when placed at the end of verbs. Here are some examples. The verb laugh, laugh, becomes the past tense verb laughed and is pronounced laughed, forming only one syllable. Another one. The verb walk, walk, becomes the past tense verb walked and is pronounced walked, forming only one syllable. By now I know you've got it. Let us continue. The verb kiss, kiss, becomes the past tense verb kissed and is pronounced wonderful, kissed. Only one syllable. The last one. The verb finish, finish, becomes the past tense verb finished, finished, having two syllables. Okay, boys and girls, let us sing our song another time. You will notice that there are 2 more verses to it. Join in. Are you ready? Let's go. Pronouncing final ED is very easy. Pronouncing final ED is very easy. There are three sounds to remember. There are three sounds to remember. Id, d, and t are the three sounds. Id, d, and t are the three sounds. You must know them and use them correctly. You must know them and use them correctly. If the verb ends with a t or a d sound, if the verb ends with a t or a d sound, then the ed, yes, the ed takes a it sound. Then the ed, yes, the ed takes a it sound. If the verb is voice, it takes a d sound. If the verb is voice, it takes a d sound, such as looked, enjoyed, and worried. Such as looked, enjoyed, and worried. If the verb is voices, it takes a t sound. If the verb is voices, it takes a t sound, such as walked, laughed, and finished. Such as walked, laughed, and finished. Okay, boys and girls, I know that you love that song. I do too. And in your spare time, you can sing it and sing it and sing it so that you learn the three sounds. Now, I have a short quiz for you. You are going to look at these words, pronounce them, and tell me the sound that is at the end. Remember, we are looking at the three sounds, id, d, and t. Let's begin. What's the ending sound? The word is whimpered. The ending sound is d. Did you get it right? Try another one. What's the ending sound? The word is visited. The ending sound is id. Did you get that one right? Try another. What's the ending sound? The word is touched. The ending sound is t. Okay, boys and girls, we are going to be engaged in a fun activity with our word wall. I have prepared it for you. All the words were taken from the story. What's the story again? Yay! The Bun Shop. Finding words that rhyme. That's the name of our activity. Look at the word wall. Yes, boys and girls, they are all past tense verbs and they all end with ed. But remember, they don't all have the same sound at the end. Look at this word. What is it? Yes, it is the word wanted. Which word on the word wall rhymes with wanted? Ah, yes, the word insisted rhymes with wanted. Can you find another? I am sure there is another word that can rhyme with wanted. Look carefully. Yes, the word needed. Pat yourselves on the shoulders. Beautiful. Let us try another one. This is the word asked. It has the t sound at the end. Can you find a word from the word wall that would rhyme with the word asked? Yes, boys and girls, the word stretched. It has the same ending sound. Can we do another one? This word says crowed. Yes, boys and girls, it has the d sound at the end. Can you find a word that will rhyme with the word crowed? Lovely. I see that you are getting it so well. The word rolled rhymes with crowed. Lovely. I enjoy that. And you can do it with your friends at school. Let us do another activity. Are we ready again? Okay. We are going to be categorizing our words based on their ending sounds. Here we have some words on our chart. They are all words that we have been using. Now, they are all mixed up. We want to categorize them based on their ending sound. So we are going to be doing that now. This is the word wanted. The ending sound is id. So we place it here. Let's do another one. This is the word touched. What is the sound? Yes, it is the t sound. So we put it over here. Let's do another. The word picked. Picked has the t sound at the end. So it goes here. Okay, boys and girls, I am going to do just one more. The word is worried. What's the sound? D. So we place it right here. Now, I am going to do, no, I'm not going to do any more. I am going to give you the opportunity to do the others on your own. You can write off the words and then do up the columns just like this and do it on your own. Or you can just think about it. Take a minute. Wonderful. Now I know that you are learning. Let us continue. Okay, boys and girls, now that we know our 3 sounds, we can go ahead and read our story fluently, ensuring that we pronounce each word correctly. Here are a few sentences that were taken from the story. I am going to read them aloud. You can read along with me and listen carefully to the ending sound of the words that are underlined. Remember, boys and girls, it is important that we pronounce our words properly. Here are the sentences. The van dropped off the buns along the way to the small shops in the other districts. Joan was proud of the bun shop and wanted to be a baker too when she grew up. Joan got out of bed and stretched. She cultivated cassava and made bammies. She warned as she rolled a bun and placed it in a baking tin. No violence, she added. He stood for a while, looked around, and then started to climb the wall that led to the window. When Tony faced Grandma, he whimpered a little. When they visited, her grandchildren had fun rolling to the bottom of the hill where the mango trees seemed to share their laughter. Did you enjoy those sentences? I sure did. Now go ahead and practice reading your story, The Bun Shop. Make sure that you pronounce all your words properly. Let's review our objectives. Remember, we had said that we wanted to achieve some things at the end of our lesson. Let's see if we achieved them. Did we pronounce words with the ED ending correctly? Yes, we did. Did we use word wall to identify rhyming words and spell sight words? Yes, we did. Did we demonstrate the use of word sorts to categorize words with the same ending sound? Oh yes, we did that. Did we read at least 5 sentences from the text which contain words ending with ED? We just did. Wonderful. You have been great students today. I do trust and hope that you enjoyed this lesson. I know that you are eager to go and tell your friends and share with your family and teachers. So go ahead, enjoy it. Be the best you can be. Thank you.
It's a new day. It's our responsibility to protect our children from harmful TV and radio content.
A and X are no-nos. PG is maybe. G is good to go.
Protect your children and report offensive broadcast content. A message from the Broadcasting Commission.
Make it a new day, yeah. We are Jamaica, Jamaica.
This is our home. Together we'll make it safer for us all.
We need to tell our children the things they need to hear. Yes, teach them what is right. No, there's no need to fight. Oh.
Let's create a safer Jamaica. A message from the Ministry of National Security.
We are Jamaica.
Mathman, your mission is to decide if the forthcoming statements are true or false. If a statement is true, eat the letter T. If it is false, eat the letter F. You will have until the count of 7 to make your decision. And beware the surreptitious Mr. Glitch.
Nice to be back for another season.
He will cause mischief if you are wrong.
Mathman, 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 Mathman.
Yeah. True or false? You need math only in jobs where you handle money, such as being a banker.
Yeah, a banker or a mathman. That's about it.
What? That's absurd. How about being a scuba diver?
Good point.
Or a choreographer?
I hadn't thought of that.
Or an airplane pilot.
I suppose you would, wouldn't you?
You use math in all these jobs. It's false.
Why am I in this business?
Woohoo!
Mathman, 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 mathman.
Use your noodle.
Mathman, 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 mathman.
Nice. True or false? You don't use math outside of school.
I never use math.
Of course you use math outside of school. How about planning a meal? Or sewing a dress?
Yeah.
Or estimating how long it will take you to get home? Or counting it?
Up to 7.
What?
You ran out of time with all that preaching, Matthew. Ha-ha!
But I was right.
So, you didn't say false.
Gotta go.
Mathman, 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 mathman,
Ugh. Play by the rules, get eaten by the rules.
These two contestants, Sean Cronin and Sharifa Monteith, will separate mathematical fact from fiction. Welcome to Square One Challenge. I'm Reggie Cathy, and now let's meet the host of our show, Larry Cedar.
Hello,
What's
hello.
up, Larry?
How you doing, Reg? Good to see you, guy.
Nice to see you.
All right, take it easy. Welcome to Square One Challenge. We have some great questions for you today. It's going to be a really super game, and we have some fabulous contestants. Welcome to Sharifa and Sean. It's good to have you here. All right, you know how we play the game, right? We're going to start you off each with 100 points. Boom, there they are. Let's get right to the first question. Chris has in front of him a tower made up of blocks like this one. All right? Here's the question. How many blocks altogether in that tower? There's your first question for the day, and now for some answers to that question, let's go to our guests from Square One TV, Arthur Howard and Louisa Lishin. Welcome.
Hi, guys.
Louisa, what do you think? How many blocks make up that tower?
Okay, well, I see 1 plus 3 plus 5 plus 7 blocks. 16 blocks.
Thank you very much. Louisa says 16 blocks. Arthur, what do you think?
Some of the blocks must be hidden by other blocks. I think there are 30 blocks.
Thank you very much. Arthur says 30. Louisa says 16. It's up to you to decide who's telling the truth, who's bluffing. Sometimes they both tell the truth. Sometimes they both bluff. You'll get 25 points for each correct decision. Think about it and write down your decision. How many blocks in the tower? Who's telling the truth? Who's bluffing? Time's up. Sean, what did you decide?
Well, I think that Louisa is bluffing and Arthur is telling the truth.
You think Louisa, who said 16 blocks, is bluffing, and Arthur, who said 30 blocks, is telling the truth. Let's see. Sharifa, what did you decide?
Well, I agree with Sean. I think that Louisa is bluffing and Arthur is telling the truth.
You agree. Louisa, bluffing. Arthur, telling the truth. Let's find out for our first question of the day how you did. Will the truth tellers please stand? Arthur was indeed telling the truth and Louisa was bluffing. Arthur, could you please explain your answer?
Sure. You see, each layer has a square number of blocks. You just couldn't see all of them. An easy way to add is 16 plus 4 is 20, plus 9 plus 1 equals 30.
Very good. Thank you, Arthur. Let's see how you did on our first question. Sean, correct about Louisa and Arthur, 50 points, a total of 150. Great start. Sharifa, also correct about both players, 50 points, a total of 150. Excellent start. We have a tie game going into our second question. Now, this is a video question, so pay close attention to the monitor. Here we have a statue of little Mr. Beasley. There he is on your left. Now, the statue is 12 centimeters wide at the bottom and 40 centimeters tall. Now, a scaled-up version of Beasley is hidden behind that curtain to the right there. It is in proportion. It is not distorted. But this bigger Beasley is 36 centimeters wide. Now, how high is it? The original statue is 12 centimeters wide by 40 centimeters tall. The scaled-up version, in proportion, not distorted, is 36 centimeters wide. How high is it? Louisa, what do you think?
To get from 12 to 36, multiply by 3. If you multiply 40 by 3, you get 120. So it's 120 centimeters tall. That's what I think.
120. Thank you, Louisa. Arthur, what do you think?
The smaller Beasley is 40 centimeters high and 12 centimeters wide, but he is 28 centimeters higher than he is wide. So the bigger statue is 36 plus 28 centimeters tall, 64 centimeters.
Arthur says 64 centimeters tall. Louisa says 120. Think about it. Write down your decision. Time's up. Sean, what did you decide?
I think that Louisa is telling the truth and Arthur is bluffing.
You think Louisa, who said 120 centimeters tall, is telling the truth, and Arthur, who said 64 centimeters tall, is bluffing. Thank you. Sharifa.
I think Louisa's bluffing and Arthur is bluffing.
You think that they are both bluffing. All right, let's find out who's right. For the second round question, will the truth tellers please stand? Louisa was telling the truth, and Arthur was bluffing. Louisa, would you like to explain your answer?
Sure. The big Beasley is 3 times as wide as the small Beasley. To be in proportion, the big Beasley has to be 3 times as high as the small one. 3 times 40 is 120. If the big statue had the dimensions Arthur suggested, 36 centimeters by 64 centimeters, it would look like this.
Thank you very much for that explanation. Let's see how you did, Sean and Sharifa. Sean, you were correct about Louisa and Arthur. You get 50 points for a total of 200 points. Good job. Sharifa, you were correct about Arthur only, but you will get 25 points for a total of 175. Very good job. It's a very close game, but here's your chance to seal a win or pull from behind. This is the challenge round. Now, in the challenge round, you can bet some or all of your points. You have 200 points, you have 175 points. This challenge round question deals with the subject of percentages. This question deals with percentages, so you might want to think about that now as you decide how much you want to bet and write that amount down on your wager board. All right, you've written down your wagers. I would like to tell you, however, that in the challenge round, to win, you must be correct about both Arthur and Louisa. Well, here's the challenge round question. Good luck. Chris is showing you a diagram. There are some tennis shoes. Your generous Uncle Willie is going to give you money to buy new sneakers. But he's a tricky fellow, and he says that he'll give you 60% of $80 or 80% of $60. Here's the challenge round question. Which is the greater amount? 60% of 80 or 80% of 60? Louisa, what do you think?
Well, guys, 80% is a bigger percentage, so 80% of 60 is greater.
Okay, thank you very much. Arthur?
No, 80 is bigger than 60, so when you take a percentage of 80, you get a bigger number. 60% of 80 is bigger.
Thank you, Arthur and Louisa. Think about it and write down your decisions. All right, you've had time to lock in your decisions. Sean, what did you decide?
I think that Louisa is bluffing and Arthur is telling the truth.
You think that Louisa, who said 80% of 60 is greater, is bluffing, and Arthur, who said 60% of 80 is greater, is telling the truth. Thank you. Sharifa?
Well, I think that Louisa is telling the truth and Arthur is bluffing.
Oh, just the opposite of Sean. You think Louisa is telling the truth and Arthur is bluffing. All right, for the challenge round, let's find out how you did. Will tellers, please stand. Actually, they were both bluffing, and let me explain to you why. 60% of $80 is $48. 80% of $60 is also $48. The same would be true for any two numbers. Let's say you pick 13 and 72. 72% of 13 is the same as 13% of 72. Either way, it's a little bit more than 9. Tough question. Let's see how you did. Now remember, you had to be correct about both players to win this round. Sean, you were unfortunately only correct about Louisa. Let's see how much you wagered. Go ahead and tell us.
I wagered 50 points.
You wagered 50 points. We'll have to subtract that from your score, leaving you a total of 150. Still a good score. Sharifa, you were only correct about Arthur. How much did you wager?
I bet 75 points.
75 points subtracted from your score leaves you with a total of 100 points, making Sean our grand prize winner. Congratulations. Fabulous game. You guys played very, very well. I must congratulate you both. Now, Sharifa, as our runner-up, you get this really cool Sport Jester gym bag. You're really going to like it. And the all